If the New York Mets are going to add one bat at the deadline, which player is the ideal fit? I'll run you through some options on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, I have been scouring the trade market, looking at every single team, trying to decide who's going to buy, who's going to sell, and when it comes to who's going to sell, what can be put on the table that can help the New York Mets become World Series contenders at this year's deadline. They already are that, but they need the pieces to put them over the top, and you have to wonder if it makes sense to get a bat, and if they do, which bat will fit this roster the best. There's a bunch of different categories I want to get into. We're going to start with star players, the toughest to acquire. We'll then get into the guys that are much easier to acquire, the rentals, and we're going to close the show with some mock trades, breaking down which really is the best option for the New York Mets. But we're going to open it up with a guy that I've already done an entire show on. So you can go back, look at the Locked On Mets archives, find my show that I did probably about a month ago now on Jiren Duran and why he is the most ideal trade deadline candidate for the Mets to go after. Now, the premise of that show was looking at Jiren Duran and his roster fit for the New York Mets. What do they need at the deadline? You could say center field, you could say third base, but there is definitely a need to plug in a bat, whether it is to the infield or into center field, where you can then bring Jeff McNeil as that bat that helps your infield. Right now, I think the Mets are in a position where they could roll with McNeil, and it might actually work, but he is limited defensively. He's holding his own, but he's certainly not an elite defender. He does not have elite athleticism, and his bat would be the best in the infield outside of course, Lindor and Alonso. But if you were able to upgrade from Brett Beatty or Ryan Mauricio playing second base to Jeff McNeil, that's going to help this team. So Jiren Duran, I think, is the ideal player fit for this roster. Now, whether his temperament is right to come in and play in New York, who knows? But I look at Jiren Duran and who he has played with over the last couple of years. Where's the leadership on the Red Sox? I think that the Mets can acquire any player, and with their management, with Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns, with their star players, with Lindor, Nimmo, Soto, Alonso, I think the Mets have an infrastructure to take anybody in and get the most out of them. And there's a lot to get out of Jiren Duran when he is right. Last year, he was a 7-win player because he was elite defensively and he put up a great offensive season. This year, he struggled, but the Red Sox have been a little bit of a sideshow at times with Rafael Devers and all the drama that surrounded that, and they wanted to win this season, but who is he taking his cues from? There was a leader on this team. It was Alex Bregman. He's been out for a minute, so you don't have that on-field leader. Maybe that has impacted his play. We really won't know, but again, the ceiling for Jiren Duran is sky high. This year, the defensive metrics have been okay, not really great. Last year, though, playing center field, he was worth 17 defensive runs saved, 8 outs above average. And in left field, it was 6 defensive runs saved, 3 outs above average. He was an elite defensive center fielder. He has the speed and athleticism to still be that. He's going to impact you on the bases. And he still has a really high ceiling with the bat. This year, and I'm recording this on Wednesday the 9th, but you look at his stats through his first 91 games played, 257 average, 313 on base, 418 slug. That is not necessarily screaming impact bat, but last year he was significantly better, 21 home runs, 34 stolen bases, a WRC plus over 130. That's weighted runs created plus, measuring hitters on a league average of 100. I believe he was, let's look up the exact number here for Jiren Duran last season, but I believe it was somewhere in the 130s, as again, he put together that 7-win season. It was exactly 130 last season and 121 the year before that, where he hit 295 in 2023, hit 285 in 2024. You're going to get a guy that can set the table for you, that can even bat a little bit later down in the lineup because of all the talent the Mets have, and give you some spark a little bit further down. It's a really good player that is under team control for 3 more years beyond this season. And I think that's what's really attractive here. He's not going to cost a lot for you year in, year out. He is in arbitration, but he's not making too much money. So you really have a guy that can be cost controlled and be your third starting outfielder for the next 3 years beyond this season. So he makes a ton of sense for the New York Mets. You just don't know if the Red Sox are going to trade him. They do have a glut of outfielders right now. They have Roman Anthony, their top prospect, who is the top prospect in baseball when he debuted. They have Cedric Rafaela, who's having a bit of a breakout season in center field. And they have Willie Abreu, who also is having a really nice season out in right field. So Jiren Duran can get squeezed because they have 3 other starting caliber outfielders right now. Granted, things can change. Injuries happen. The Red Sox are not just going to trade Durant to trade him. But he does feel like the piece that makes the most sense to move unless they decide to move Willie. But I think there is a chance that Durant fetches them a little bit more. Willie also comes with more control, so maybe they want to keep him plugged into right field and have a future outfield of Anthony in left, Rafaela in center, and Willie Abreu in right. So that's where I'm at with Duran. The other player the Red Sox could move that would really move the needle for the Mets, and probably the best player I think the Mets could acquire for this season, is Alex Bregman. Now, money aside, because I don't really know what you give for a $40 million player. Granted, a lot of that's deferred, but it's an interesting contract to be moved. I also don't know if the Red Sox are looking to move on from Bregman because they just traded Devers. Maybe now that freed up money is going to be used to extend Bregman on a longer-term contract, or maybe the hope is that they just keep him on this current 3-year deal and he does not opt out. What the Mets would be getting, though, is a Gold Glove third baseman who this year in 51 games was hitting .299, 385 on base, 553 slug, a 157 WRC plus. Granted, those numbers are juiced a little bit because he is the perfect bat for Fenway Park. With that said, I think he could hit for the Mets. I think he could hit anywhere. And he is a battle-tested playoff performer who has World Series under his belt. So no matter what asterisks you want to attach to the first one, he has been in every big game before. You plug him in, that's the guy you win a World Series with. So Alex Bregman, definitely a name that deserves mentioning. I just don't know if he's going to get traded, and that's where we are going to fall on the last player to mention in this segment, which is Byron Buxton. Should be an all-star this year. As I'm recording this right now, he has yet to be named as a replacement, but I hope he does get in there. He's got 20 home runs by the all-star break. He's playing above-average defense in center field again and playing consistently for a guy that has been very injury-prone. Played over 100 games last year, not much more than 100, but still was on the field for a good amount. And this year he has been healthy. He's been running a WRC plus of 140 for the last 2 years. I think his WRC plus last season was like 141, and this year it's 140 at the time of recording. So you're talking about a center fielder that's 40% better than your league average hitter. Not a lot of those that go around. He's also on an affordable contract. Granted, he's injury prone, but $15 million per season for 3 more years after this one. He's not someone that you're going to break the bank on. And when you have him on the field healthy, he is an incredible value on that deal. I would love Byron Buxton on the Mets. I just don't know if the Twins are going to pull the trigger on trading him. So again, when we're talking about star level players, those are the 3 that jump out. Jiren Duran making the most sense when it comes to roster fit and cost of contract. Prospects, we'll talk about that a little bit more in the final segment today. Bregman is a proven winner that could plug right into third base. You roll from there. And Buxton would be another plug-and-play guy out in center field that would give you an option to start there for the next 4 seasons, just like Durant. He would cost a little bit more. He's a little bit more injury-prone, but he's also a more impact player when healthy. Granted, I don't know if he's going to play center field for 4 more years, and you do have Nimmo and Soto under contract. But those are the best players available. I want to go to the other end of the spectrum on guys that are a little more easily acquired, so we're going to talk about some rentals here in the next segment. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever been in the situation where you just decide at the last minute you want to head to the ballpark with your friends or family and check out a game? Well, Game Time is the solution to your problems because it's the fastest and simplest way to buy tickets to games. The price on the app actually dropped the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible deals on last-minute tickets clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee so you can take all of the worry out of buying tickets. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game, with the second half kicking off over the weekend and it being David Wright weekend at Citi Field. I know you want to be in the ballpark for those games, Mets versus Reds, particularly Saturday when number 5 will get retired. Game Time is the place to go to take all the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. As I'm recording this, we're about 250 away. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Let's talk about some rentals that make sense for the New York Mets. And the biggest name rental, and in the past, you wouldn't even have called him a rental, but his play has put him to a point where I don't think his contract will be extended beyond this season. And that is Luis Robert. Luis Robert has gone from a player that a couple years ago was considered one of the best valued players in baseball under his contract, where he had a superstar who was making less than $20 million a season with a couple of club options at $20 million per once he would hit free agency, which is about where he's at right now, to a guy that is overpaid even at $15 million this season. He has not been good. His OPS, as I'm recording this through 73 games, is .584. That's brutal. He's hitting 185. So why would the Mets get Luis Robert? Well, his ceiling is what we saw a couple years ago in 2023 when in his age 25 season, Luis Robert hit 38 home runs, stole 20 bags, won a Gold Glove, won a Silver Slugger, showed that 5-tool potential in center field. It is an incredible ceiling. It's just a floor that has dropped out from under him over the last couple years. Last year in 2024, he had a 657 OPS in 100 games. And again, this year, that OPS has dipped below 600. Again, he's making $15 million this year, 2 club options at $20 million per, but I can't see a world where any team would exercise them based on how much he struggled. He would have to go somewhere and have an incredible change of scenery, uptick in performance, where a team is just bought in on, okay, the White Sox were the problem, not Luis Robert. I would not trade much to get him. I don't think that he is really much better than Tyrone Taylor at this point. And honestly, I think Tyrone Taylor probably is a better player in the sense that he's not going to give away as many at-bats as Robert does chasing out of the zone. Now, he doesn't have the high-end impact of a guy that can, hit 8 home runs in a month if he ever got right, but I think Tyrone Taylor has a higher floor at this point. Granted, I would look at Luis Robert and say, this is what you were hoping to get out of Jose Siri, but a much higher end option. This is like your designer version of Jose Siri. Now, it's not going to cost much to get him, and I think that's why it would make sense to take a flyer. If you can give up basically nothing, if you can give up some teenager, an 18-year-old prospect, and you get Luis Robert, a guy that has shown in the past all-star potential, and that, hey, it's a $2 million buyout, you're not committed to him beyond this season, plug him in there, see what happens. Worst case scenario, he brings you a bunch of speed on the bases and great defense in center field, and you make him a pseudo fourth outfielder. Best case scenario, the change of scenery unlocks the guy, and all of a sudden you have one of the biggest steals at this year's deadline. So Luis Robert is definitely a name that should be mentioned. He is a flyer I would take only under the circumstance of you're not giving up anything of value. If the market is so thin on bats that Luis Robert is going to take a real prospect to pry from the White Sox, let another team potentially make that mistake. But if it's going to cost you, again, an 18-year-old infielder or some guy that throws hard that's in the Dominican Republic right now, playing Dominican Summer League baseball, it's just not going to cost you that top-end prospect capital. Why not take a shot on a guy that has that much upside? Similar type of player in the sense that it's a guy that's not performing well, who's a rental, who has a higher upside, is Cedric Mullins. Now, Mullins is a left-handed bat. Robert's right-handed. So Robert, in some ways, would complement Jeff McNeil in center field. But Cedric Mullins would allow you to move Jeff McNeil into the infield as a left-handed bat that you could platoon with Tyrone Taylor. The problem with Mullins is he got to a great start this season at 927 OPS. Then he had 2 consecutive months where his OPS was below 600. He was just playing brutal baseball. So now you look at him and you wonder, all right, he was bad in May. He was bad in June. He has started off July a little bit better, but it's still not a guy that I look at and say, oh, yeah, he's going to go from Baltimore to New York and he's going to hit like crazy over the last couple months of the season. Not a bad flyer to take on a guy, but when you have limited bats available, there could be a lot of teams that are looking for center field help that say, you know what, Cedric Mullins is better than Luis Robert, and he's going to be more affordable because he's a rental. He hits the market. There's no buyout I got to worry about for next season. Makes more sense. He might end up costing more than you'd like. I would not give up anything significant for Cedric Mullins. The last guy that fits in this bucket to me of rentals that can provide something, but he's a little bit different because he's not a center fielder. He's a utility man that gives you a pretty high floor, and that's Willie Castro. And I actually really like the idea of trading for Willie Castro. He's 28 years old. He's going to be a free agent again, a rental. This year, as I'm recording right now, through 68 games played, he's hitting 270, 364 on base, 426 slug, a switch hitter, not a great defender, but he literally can play all over the diamond, can play some shortstop in a pinch. Second and third base, probably the best positions, but you can stick him in left field or right as well. Really a versatile piece. And what I like about him, his on-base percentage is an identical 364 when he's batting left-handed and right-handed as a switch hitter. He's going to get on base. He's going to give you a good at-bat. Now, when you look at where he swings it better, it's certainly from the right side this season, an 892 OPS, batting right-handed against left-handed pitching compared to a 745 OPS against right-handed arms swinging from the left side. He's also a different hitter where against lefties, he's more of a masher. He's hitting for a higher average. He's slugging more. When he's batting left-handed, he's more trying to get on base. His walk rate spikes. If he's giving me a good at-bat from each side and he can play all over, that is a versatile piece to plug into your roster. I don't think he is the guy that's going to impact you a ton. I think theoretically, Ronnie Mauricio can do a lot of the same things and provide more impact with the bat because he's got more power, but he does not have all the experience of Willie Castro. He's not going to give you the same veteran approach in the box as Willie Castro, where the at-bat is just going to be a good one. So Willie Castro is definitely a guy that I have circled, and I don't think it would cost a ton to get him. Maybe one prospect, a 1-for-1, find a guy that Twins really like. I would be all in on Willie Castro. I think he makes a lot of sense for this roster. But with all that said, there's still one player that I think makes the most sense if you're talking about a rental, a guy that would move the needle for this lineup and really make this team more dangerous. We've talked about him before on the show, so I want to close things out talking about him again, and then we'll go through some mock trades on a lot of the pieces we've talked about throughout this show. I'll give you a mock for Jiren Duran. I'll give you a little bit of a mock for a Willie Castro. So we're going to go through all of that here in just a minute. Before I play the pre-recorded final segment of the show today, this is future Ryan adding an addendum to this last segment of the show ahead of past Ryan. I recorded this show a few days ago. Jesse Winker had, I believe, either made his return or was about to make his return in Baltimore, and he had not gotten hurt again yet. So I recorded this show about bats the Mets could acquire, thinking that the DH spot might be locked in with Jesse Winker and Starling Marte. Now that Winker has gone down again, I will add a caveat that I would be even more hesitant to trade Mark Vientos. I talked about the idea of trading Vientos for Suarez. I'll get into all the details in a second. I still think there's some merit to that type of a trade concept. But even then, when I first recorded this, I just listened back to see if I had to re-record the entire show. I was torn then, and I'm even more torn now because I'm recording this part of the show after Vientos had that massive hit on Friday night to help the Mets beat the Royals. And I could see both Vientos and Eugenio Suarez on this roster, with Vientos being the everyday DH and Suarez being your third baseman. And then you let Mauricio and Beatty figure out second base, and you just use prospects to get a rental third baseman at Suarez. The Mets have the prospect capital that it doesn't have to be Vientos. The idea originally of trading Vientos, as I get into, was because it would clear up the roster a little bit, because if you have Vientos, Winker, and Marte on the roster with Suarez as your everyday third baseman, what's exactly Vientos' role? Well, now Vientos' role can just be everyday DH. So I wanted to add this again, little addendum to the final segment before you listen to it, to give you some more context based on the information we know now, Winker being out, and hopefully Vientos turning a corner. We'll see what he does in the final couple games of the series. You guys will all know that as you'll listen to this on the, I believe, the Monday show, I think, out of the break. So here is the rest of your pre-recorded show. And I still think that most of the stuff I stand by, but I had to put a little bit of something on the front end that just provides some further context for you all. If you're an everydayer that's always tuning into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, and you get a line graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, the guy that is sort of a combo between star player, actually was an all-star this year, is an all-star this year, combination of high-end talent, but also the cost of acquisition would not be crazy because he's a rental. You got to look at Eugenio Suarez as a real fit for the New York Mets. Now, so far this year, through his first 89 games played, he has 28 home runs and 74 RBIs, a 139 WRC+. This is a really good slugging third baseman. He can get streaky, but when he gets hot, few players leave the yard with as much consistency as Eugenio Suarez. You plug him into the lineup after Pete Alonso to provide some protection. You have a lot of power potential, 1 through 5, with Nimmo, Lindor, Soto, Alonso, Suarez. That's a deep team. He is basically what you wanted Mark Vientos to be. And I think there's a chance that you could trade Mark Vientos for him straight up. You know, you would move on from Vientos when his value is a little bit lower because he's had such a struggle this season. But for the Diamondbacks, they would look at Mark Vientos and say, hey, 4.5 years of team control, why not? Trade Suarez, you plug in Vientos right away at third base, or if you want to bring up Jordan Lawler and have him be your third baseman, I'm actually not sure if he's up right now. I know he's been up at times this season, one of their top prospects. You can do that. You could trade Josh Naylor, plug Mark Vientos at first base, and he can be your long-term Christian Walker replacement. I think Mark would absolutely rake in the desert. I think it'd be the perfect fit for him, a great change of scenery candidate. I think you might look at that trade. If the Mets don't win a World Series, you might regret it in the sense that Vientos could become an all-star over there. He has that potential, especially in a hitter-friendly environment. But if you look at your next 4 years with Mark Vientos and you're not committed to him being a real big piece, if you're looking at Mark Vientos and saying, we believe as a front office in Ronnie Mauricio and Brett Beatty Moore, we believe in Jet Williams and Jacob Reimer and all these prospects you have more, we don't think that Mark Vientos is a long-term answer. We have Ryan Clifford who could be our first baseman. So if you look at your prospects, you look at what's in-house right now at the big league level, and you think that Vientos has a murky future with you anyway, maybe the time is now to pull the trigger on a deal, and you could get Suarez, and I even think you could expand this package. And the Diamondbacks have rental arms that can be traded too. So as we get into the reliever show this week, the starting pitcher show this week, these are, the Diamondbacks are going to come up again on those shows with pieces that fit the Mets. So you can get it all in one trade. Maybe it's Merrill Kelly and a Eugenio Suarez for Mark Vientos and a pitching prospect. The mock I have here is actually getting Shelby Miller, who's been lights out this year, a reliever. You go Shelby Miller and Eugenio Suarez for Mark Vientos and RJ Gordon. RJ Gordon just got called up to Double-A, but he's nowhere near as highly touted as Jonathan Santucci, who was the Mets' second-round pick last year, Gordon 13th-round pick. Both of those guys pitched well in high A, but you have a surplus of arms, so you can give up one of your arms that's not one of your top 5 pitching prospects. So no McLean, no Brandon Sproat, no Jonah Tong, no Jonathan Santucci, no Jack Wenninger. I mean, there's a lot of pitching prospects the Mets have that are really exciting. You could hold on to all of them, use Vientos and his surplus of control, along with an arm that they like that's not one of your top 5 arms in the system, but still a really good pitching prospect that the Diamondbacks could plug in. And you can get yourself a rental pitcher, whether that is a guy in Merrill Kelly who's throwing the ball great this season, who would help solidify the middle of your rotation, or if it's Shelby Miller, a late inning reliever that helps your bullpen. you can really swing big on one rental trade where you capitalize on all of the control of Mark Vientos and really try to round out your roster. I think that's the trade that probably makes the most sense for the New York Mets, because it just takes what you have on your roster and how the pieces are fitting together, and it just upgrades you clearly at third base. You then have second base open, up for grabs between Beatty, Mauricio, Acuna, Jet Williams. You can figure out that spot. You keep Jeff McNeil in center field for this season, and I think you have a really deep and talented lineup. So that's a deal that I really am torn on, because there's part of me, as some of you probably listened to the show as this week, as I was getting into, if the Mets need another bat after Jesse Winker came back. And I guess as you're listening to this, that was last week. But the point is, I have been torn on this because I've been thinking about this trade a lot. A Suarez for Vientos swap makes a ton of sense. Part of me still would prefer them to just roll with what they got and continue to have the longer term flexibility of having a Mark Vientos on your roster, because I believe he's a lot better than what he's shown this season. I don't know if he's going to be as good as he was in 2024, but I think he's going to be closer to that than what we've seen this season. I think you'd be selling low. So there is, again, a part of me that would say, hey, just don't do anything. I'd rather keep Vientos than trade for Suarez. There's another part of me that looks at this season. If the Mets want to win the World Series this year, Eugenio Suarez is a guy to go out and get. So that's where I'm at. I think that is the piece that is most likely to be moved, certainly. When it comes to the impact guys, I think Suarez more likely than Jiren Duran to get moved, certainly more likely than Alex Bregman to get moved, or Byron Buxton. I think he provides more impact than all the rentals we talked about in the last segment. But a half measure would be one of those rentals where, again, you're trading a teenager for Luis Robert. Maybe for Willie Castro, you are giving up an RJ Gordon or one of those types of guys. Last year, the Mets were able to pull off a lot of trades where they just sent one prospect in return. You had the huge right-hander that got Jesse Winker from the Nationals. Gosh, I always get drawn a blank on his name again. What was his name? Oh, geez, I'm going to kick myself when I see exactly the prospect. I'm picturing his face. And I've done this before, but who is that prospect? Tyler Stewart. A starting pitching prospect that, you know what, you're willing to give him up because he wasn't one of your top arms. Same thing can go this year. You can trade one of these guys that has performed very well this season, but it's not one of your top 5 arms, and you can get a rental like a Willie Castro fairly easily. Last year the Mets were able to trade the 4th outfielder type. Geez, I'm drawing a blank on this one too. For Rylan Thomas, who had performed very well for the Mets, but had the ceiling of a 4th outfielder, and you traded him and were able to get Ryan Stanek, a guy that helped out your bullpen a ton. And this year, Rylan Thomas has a 756 OPS, not that bad. Has he made his debut in the big leagues yet? He actually did. Wow, Rylan Thomas came up and played 3 games. How about that? In May, so I guess he's on the 40 now. Regardless, not a piece that you're really regretting moving. So I could see the Mets 1-for-1 getting really any of those rentals. Willie Castro is the one that I like the most. Luis Robert is a flyer that I would take. But again, I'm just taking on the salary. I'm not giving up anything for him. And then we'll close on Jiren Duran, a mock trade to get Duran. I think the Red Sox would be interested in one of your infielders, whether that is Mark Vientos on betting on a bounce back, or if it's Ronnie Mauricio, who's flashing a lot right now. I think that can be part of the starting point in the deal. I'd imagine the Red Sox would want a really good pitching prospect, though, for Jiren Duran, and it might be one of your top 3. I think the Mets are good enough right now with their system that a Jack Wenninger could move the needle in a trade, but for Jiren Duran, it might require a Nolan McLean, a Jonah Tong, or a Brandon Sproat. Now, I'd be willing to do it if you're giving up only one of the 3, and if that really is the biggest part of the package where you don't have to give up too much more on top of it, where, all right, maybe it is Ronnie Mauricio, and I'd hate to do it, but Jonah Tong. Can that be it? Is that all you give up? Or is it maybe a really lower end tertiary piece? I think that one of those pitching prospects would really move the needle. If it is a Jack Wenninger or a Jonathan Santucci instead of your top 3 arms, I think you have to give up a little bit more on a third piece. But the Mets have some center fielders like Nick Morabito and AJ Ewing who are not their absolute top prospects. I think AJ Ewing is a fringe top 100 guy right now, but still you are holding on to Jet Williams. You're holding on to Ryan Clifford. You're holding on to Carson Benj, who I don't think I'm trading for anybody. You're holding on to Jacob Reimer. I mean, those are the four guys right now that I would probably say are the top position player prospects in this system. I think there's a way where you can get this done without giving up one of those top three pitching prospects. It's just going to require a lot of back and forth and maybe a bigger deal with more pieces going to the Red Sox. Whereas I think if you put one of your top three pitching prospects on the table, along with Ronnie Mauricio, I think you could really move the needle enough to get a deal done where you're not giving up too much beyond that. It's going to be interesting to see if the Red Sox are really engaged with Duran and if he is the perfect fit for the Mets. I think Eugenio Suarez as a rental is the biggest impact bet the Mets could realistically acquire because I just don't think that Bregman's going to get moved. And again, I don't even think this team has to make one of these big moves. I think they could get Willie Castro to sort of improve their floor at a bunch of different positions and still try to rely on some of the young players and hope that Ronnie Mauricio can sustain what's been a pretty good hot streak swinging from the left side lately, that Brett Beatty can continue what he's done this season, being a elite defender who is getting closer and closer to a consistent league average bat, or if Mark Vientos can rediscover the form that made him Eugenio Suarez light last year, and you're better off just not even making the trade. So the Mets have a lot of options at their disposal, but those are the bats that to me jump out the most as impact bats that could complete the Mets lineup this season. Should be a lot of fun to see exactly how the deadline is going to play out. And I'm going to have more shows this week breaking down the different facets of this roster. So we're going to talk about starting pitchers again that the Mets could target to solidify this rotation, as well as bullpen arms. And then at the end of the week, I'm going to do a prospect show where I dive into all of the different prospects the Mets have that they could put on the table, who's untouchable, and what type of trades would you move certain guys. I just talked about it a little bit. Like I would consider moving a top three pitching prospect in the system if you're getting a high impact player with control. But if it's a rental, I'm not putting those guys on the table for anybody. So that's the give and take, and that's what we'll talk about on that show later on this week. I really appreciate you all for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. You can follow me on social media at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything the world of sports. Locked On Sports Today has your local experts for each team, league experts for each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.